We believe strongly that dentist-owned practices are better for the dentist, they're better for their staff, they're better for their patients, and they're better for the community.
Hey there, dental economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, we're excited to welcome Mike Baird, a serial entrepreneur and visionary leader with a remarkable track record of building and scaling transformative businesses in healthcare and technology. As the CEO and founder of Accelerate Dental, Mike is revolutionizing the dental partnership organization space by empowering entrepreneurial dentists to grow faster, improve work-life balance, and share in the financial success of their practices. Mike, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this morning before we jumped on this call. If you went back in time, let's call it 10, 12 years ago, you had founded Vizia, it was telehealth, and you told yourself a decade from now, you're going to be running a dental service organization. Would you have believed yourself?
Not in a million years. And if you'd gone 5 years before that, I wouldn't even thought I'd be in healthcare, let alone in dental. It's funny how these things work out. I was always kind of a tech guy and sort of fell into healthcare and then the dental. But once you arrive in places like this, you find the passion and the fun of what it's like to work in healthcare, to be in an industry where not only do you have fun and hopefully make good returns, but you also do good in the world. And it's an excellent place to be.
I've had this notion, so I've been in technology for 10 years now. I used to sell restaurant and hospitality point of sale solutions. And while I was doing that and servicing all these clients, I was like, you know what, maybe I should open up a restaurant. Like maybe I could do this. And then I moved into a product where we were servicing mostly family entertainment centers. And I saw the rise of all these, trampoline parks and different like indoor skate things. And I was like, wow, these are really successful businesses. Maybe I could do that. And so I heard Steve Bilt once say, it's always easier to run the other guy's business. When you've come from technology and then moved in to running a dental organization, what are some of the things that surprised you that maybe you thought were going to be easier than they are?
I always like to say that working with dental practices is simple, but not easy, if that makes sense. It's a relatively straightforward business, right? Get more patients in the door, take good care of them, improve your collections, have high customer satisfaction. There's a lot less complexity than other businesses like running a SaaS company where you might have 50 different products in multiple countries and things of that nature. But what is always more complex, and in particular, the way we run our model, we give tremendous amounts of autonomy, is it's a people business. And so a people business means I've got to find, the right skill and talent to run the office. I've got to find and retain, hygienists and other qualified, clinical personnel. And I've got to help coach a dentist whose first instincts and nature are not necessarily around operating a business. They're around patient care. And all those things, they're all people issues or challenges, have proven to be a great challenge. I would say, there's good things about it as well, but that is the challenge of a dental practice, is always getting the people aligned and the culture aligned and the incentives aligned to make sure that you can deliver quality care and also deliver a quality business.
Sure. Could you walk us through a little bit, kind of your thought process, after your time at HS1, when you're deciding that this is the path that you want to pursue? What was that like? What were your internal discussions and how did you ultimately settle on, this is going to bring you satisfaction and be something that you were really interested in doing?
It started in an interesting place. I was relatively new to dental. I had run a bunch of SaaS companies in the healthcare space, primarily telemedicine, and really enjoyed it. Came to Henry Schein One, big software company. It wasn't really a big departure from my prior experience. But in that role, I got to know pretty much all the major leaders of DSOs, and they're fantastic people. They're all trying to do good things in the industry. And I saw a couple of trends that I thought were very interesting that kind of spurred the entrepreneur in me to want to do something different. The first is that the wave of consolidation and DSOs and, getting scale is coming no matter what. I saw this in medical, where today well over 4 out of 5 doctors are part of a group on the normal healthcare side of the business, healthcare physicians. And that trend was definitely not going away. And it needs to come, because these are unoptimized businesses. The second trend that really drove some of our thinking was looking at different regions of the country. And so I had relocated in the pandemic from the East Coast to the Mountain West to Utah. I live outside Park City. And this area of the country in particular was dramatically under-penetrated with respect to kind of the DSO wave. And so those two trends were sufficient to get me excited about starting something. What I didn't anticipate was the third trend, which was when you decide to start a business, and look, I spent 4 years at McKinsey & Company, I've got a strategy background, MBA. When you start to evaluate a market space, because I thought I knew it pretty well coming from Shine and working with almost every DSO in the country, I didn't realize the breadth of different models out there, the breadth of different opinions by physicians and dentists. And when we started this, we embarked on kind of a market study. So not only had I talked with many amazing founders of DSOs who and many have been on this podcast, we started talking to dentists and probably talked to almost 100 different dentists. What are you looking for? How do you feel about DSOs? What are your challenges in your practices? How do you want to grow? And that's where the real surprise is it totally changed our perception. I think a lot of people look at this and think this is shooting fish in a barrel. You roll up from small, practices that are not optimized. You get to some, critical mass. You sell it to somebody else, you make money, right? That's sort of where people naively start in the DSO marketplace. And as you may or may know, I think over a fifth of DSOs go bankrupt and there's lots of challenges. It's definitely not an easy business. But for us, that led us down a totally different path that we were very shocked to hear, which was dentists inherently don't want to be part of a group. They feel like it's the only option out there. And we kind of landed on some novel ideas around how to structure it and do something different that weren't expected, that really changed, my background. I'm an operating partner in a fund. I've been in VC private equity backed companies for the last, 15 years. And suddenly we're turning all of that on its head. And that was the part I didn't expect, that we probably spent 6 months doing the Einstein formula on a whiteboard. Like, how could this actually work if we're going to try to do something that mirrors what we think doctors want in the marketplace and what we're willing to do as investors, operators, whatever it may be? And that wasn't an easy place to find a solution that we thought worked for everyone. We think we've landed on one now, and we'll talk more about that. But that was part of the storming and brainstorming and, creative process that led us to accelerate.
That's interesting with the kind of the surveying of all these different dentists and finding out what it is that they were looking for. What were maybe some of the things that surprised you? When I first joined Planet DDS 5 years ago, I'd go on all these different message boards and just try to read different things from the dental industry. And there were certainly some negative connotations as it related to DSOs or their reputation from doctors. They'd feel like they were being forced to maybe do what they didn't want to do in some cases. What were some of the reasons that you heard or the explanations given for what it is that they would actually want?
I think all dentists want to exit at some point, right? They know this is their most valued asset. I sort of joke that dentists are heavily involved in private equity, and it's very private equity. They put their whole life savings and their whole career on the line for one business. They're not as diversified as, other investors are. And so they have significant concerns about cost, especially post-COVID. Hygiene is a tremendous challenge for dentists to find hygienists. Labor costs, supply costs are all up. Scale, I think, is the next one. They look at, where is my industry going? And if I see a big box dental office, what happens if Walmart decides to do dental clinics, on every town, which they've looked at. And so there's a lot of panic and fear about that. And so they start to think, well, I guess there's really only one option. It feels like the old way of selling to another dentist at the end of my career who hopefully can get the money to do it. That feels less likely, though. I hope it will be, but who knows what 20 years will bring. But we also found a fair amount of, they still want autonomy. They want to feel like they put their name on the door, their blood, sweat, and tears in building a practice, in attracting every one of those patients. And they don't want to just be told what to do. And on some level, that's a fear about every single DSO model out there, and rightfully so. And so I think those were some of the key findings. I think on our side, it was also, I'm a business guy, right? I have a fundamental belief that businesses do better at scale that, I spent a lot of time and money getting an MBA from a top business school and going to McKinsey and Company and, checking the boxes of strategy and finance and marketing, et cetera. And I will always believe that business people are better business managers than someone who got 3 weeks of a crash course on business and dental. And so I think there's a value there. That the problem is, how do you marry those two things together? How do you take the purity of what a clinician wants to do, which is to serve their patient first? They want to make money, right? They didn't go to all these years of dental school to not make money. But I don't know many dentists that wouldn't gladly trade off monetary rewards for taking care of their patients first. It's just in their DNA. And so when we would look at the profit pool, like, okay, if a DSO can come in and bring practices together and bring scale, they make money, right? Somehow they improve this. We believe in the model, they make money. But our first thought on this was, does the profit pool have to be shared in the traditional way? And this is where we started looking at DSOs and feeling like there really is only one or two models. I know there's a lot of flex on those models, but the prevailing model is we take 100% or we take slightly less than 100%. That's what the model looks like. And so kind of seeing some of those trends is what really then kicked off our thoughts on trying to create something different and new.
And so what did you land on? And what is the model for Accelerate?
You've heard the quote, I've heard the quote. If you see one DSO, you've seen one DSO. And we've heard this over and over again. But when we stepped down and looked at it, we felt like there really were two prevailing models in the space, and they're good models. And look, I've worked with so many great DSO leaders who are doing great things. So this is not meant to be a critique in any way. It's just meant to be, as markets evolve, we want to have differentiation. The wave one model to me is we go find dentists that are 2 years from retirement. We buy 100% of the practice. They get a better cash out than they would have otherwise. They work back for a few years till they retire. We now staff it with younger associates, and that's corporate dentistry with its pros and its cons. I think we give a lot of credit to MB2, and I think they deserve it with the DPO model. And the fundamental change there was it doesn't have to be 100%. It could be 70. It could be 80. It could be 60 in some cases, right? It's still going to be majority control, but because we're sharing a little more with that dentist, number one, it gives them more direct rewards on, some of the work that they're doing. So they share in some of the upside. There's definitely a little more autonomy. Now, eventually there are still rules about majority control. And at some point, some other PE firm can buy a DPO and they can say, look, we're the majority owner, so we're going to do something different. But that was really the primary change. So while there's a lot of flavors of culture and how we treat people and things of that nature, it's still a majority owned model, but it's slightly different in that we let the dentist, keep a little more. Our big revelation when we started was, well, what if we were 51%? 51. We're going to share more with the dentist. We want to, make this more equal. And as an investor, as a guy that's an operating partner and an LP in many funds, I had a hard time letting go of that concept. It's like, well, we're going to be investors, right? At the end of the day, we got to protect ourselves. And I can't remember who, one of the dentists I was talking to says, why are you so hung up on this 51% thing? Why does it matter that much? And it really comes back to a lesson that I've learned in my leadership time and time again. There's hard control and soft control. And you can be super excited all day long that you have hard control over someone or something, but I'm the boss. So if I tell you, you're going to do this, right? Because I can fire you, or I own 62%. So ultimately I have the vote. So you have to do this. The reality is humans by their very nature prioritize choice and agency and wanting to have autonomy. And you can tell a dentist, you have to do this, and they can say, or I could just not show up. And then you're really in trouble, right? And so we believe in soft power. We're going to give you recommendations. We're going to give you guidance. But at the end of the day, even if I have theoretical control, you could do something totally different. And so our model at its core, if I were to say the wave three, and again, not that one is better than the other, it's just a data model, is we start from a place of we will never, ever have majority control over a dental practice. And by the way, with just that one value, number one, it makes us different than what I count as about 250 DSOs in the space. Because I can tell you it's less than 5 of those that are willing to be non-majority control. So we start with that. That's principle number one. And that has a lot of implications. It means it changes us from being a manager to a coach instantly. It means that we have to find really good partners because, look, we also don't want to affiliate with practices who say, look, it'd be great if you gave me ideas, but I'm not going to enact any of them. Well, that won't be good for us either. We don't want to waste our time. It means that we have a different expectation of our dentists. We want them to feel and act as a CEO in the practice. And look, they get rewards from it because they're the majority arms of these practices. it changes the whole culture and nature of the way that we operate. So that's principle number one. And that's my simple way of, if you want to break up the market real quick, while there's cultural differences, it is literally an ownership model and the implications of that ownership model that we start with. So that's principle number one. Principle number two for us is the power of the topco and the importance of that topco being shared by everybody. And so we are not private equity backed. I was fortunate to have a couple of exits. And so I helped self-fund a lot of this, but we actually got 30 plus dentists to be the core investors and raise the money to start our group. And we did that because we wanted, look, lots of DSOs can say, we have dentists that have ownership, of our DSO. They can't say the dentists are the owners, of the DSO. And that was big to us because it changes the way we think about operating as a management team. So not only do we feel like we're true partners in the practice, like we have to be, often we start at 50-50. Our average ownership is more like 35%, third owners in a practice, because we tend to dilute with them as we bring on associates. We really want to be true partners. Well, if we're aligned to the practice level, we want to be aligned to the topco as well. And so I really think of my investors as my boss. And if those investors are dentists, they will have a slightly, obviously, investors want to make money, but they have a different view for the longevity of their industry and where this goes and the practices we do and what the priorities are. And it doesn't mean that make money is not a priority, but clinical care might be a slightly different rank order on that threshold. How we help dentists in their retirement, what flexibility we give them, there might be different things. So number two is we're not and don't ever intend to be private equity owned, and we're not for sale. This is meant to be owned by dentists for the long term. So that's the other really crazy thing. When we started this, it's literally built into our operating agreement before we ever brought on a single practice that the management team has. So we only have one class of preferred stock. So my stock's the same as the dentist stock. There are no additional rights that they have, with one exception. They have a right that I don't have. And on the question of a sale, I'm literally not allowed to vote. Only active practicing dentists could ever choose to sell this. And that was our way of coming in from day one on this principle number two of dentist ownership to say, this is your destiny. Our job is to help you make a group that meets the goals of dentistry best. And I'm not saying that other DSOs don't, but I know that hopefully by prioritizing how dentists are involved, we hope to have a better outcome in that regard. And then that leads to point number three, which I think is probably the most radical and ambitious one that we have. And I'll use it with a little bit of a provocative statement. We think that this will be the generation of dentists that either choose to totally sell out their entire profession or will reimagine something better for their profession. And part of that's because they don't know any better. They're all units of one, and they think, okay, I can either go solo and make less money, or I can go to a DSO and sell. I think there's nothing in between. And we're trying to get them to imagine that there are other alternatives and other markets that they can use as analogs where they don't sell out. Because what's happened in medical is they've sold out. You don't own practice equity anymore if you are a doctor today. But in dentistry, depending on the numbers you believe, we're at 25, 30%, DSO ownership at this point. There's still a good chunk of that industry that hasn't sold out. And our view, point number three for us, is what we call the perpetual model. We believe strongly that dentist-owned practices are better for the dentists, they're better for their staff, they're better for their patients, and they're better for the community. And so goal number one for us is how do we make it so that dentists are the long-term owners of these clinics and practices for infinity, for as far out as we can see in the future. Because while I've been very blessed by being in private equity and having great investment returns and having exits and things of that nature, there is a lot of data that shows that post-private equity involvement in healthcare, long-term, rates tend to go up and quality of care tends to go down. And investors tend to make good money. They're not all, necessarily bad things. I mean, it's great as an investor. And so we started with that. So how does that work? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. We look to analogs in businesses like accounting or attorneys or other consultants, where these are professional business services. And in particular, they're models where there needs to exist a degree of trust between you and your advisor. And these models tend towards a partnership model. So think of an accountant, at Ernst & Young. They make partner, they make most of their money of their clients at their local firm, but they also participate in the earnings from the firm as a whole. It's not private equity owned. It is not publicly traded. The partners are the owners for the long term. And when it's time for them to retire, they're selling their partnership stake to another partner that's coming in. That model is prevalent in attorneys as well. And there's a couple other industries that follow that model. And we said, well, why can't that work in dentistry? There's a lot of similar things where You want to know that your dentist is telling you to have some work done because it's the right answer and not because somewhere there's an investor that says, but what creative strategies do I have to get the business up by 30% this year? Again, every dentist wants to grow their practice, but we want to keep that purity of they want to grow up for the right reasons because they're treating more patients and they're, doing more good. And so this perpetual model basically is what we just described. Dentists don't sell to private equity. They sell to their partners. But because they're part of a group, they still get the same benefits of scale, of business operations performance. I mean, no one looks at Ernst & Young and thinks, oh, that's a backward company that doesn't know how to run something at scale. But the benefits accrue to the partners. And so those three things make up the core of our model. And we believe it's totally differentiated in the marketplace. The private equity model doesn't lend itself to minority control. And part of this is because we're willing as a management team that we think that it's better to have more people that are part of this and transform the industry and give an alternative. Because I believe that 10 years from now, when that dental school graduate comes out on the current trends, their only choice will be to go to a DSO and likely to never have true practice ownership. Will they have profit sharing? Yes. May they own 5 or 10%? Maybe. But we still believe there's enough people that go into this profession because they love the idea of building their brand and having their shingle on the door and figuring out how to grow this. And we're going to make that possible for the long term. And our hope is that 10,000 dentists, affiliate, or that there's other people that follow the same model. It doesn't just have to be us. That's kind of how our model differentiates itself.
There's a lot there, and that definitely is a differentiated model. I have a ton of questions. So is part of the benefit, other than the autonomy for the dentist or the practice owner who still retains majority control, is that when that kind of perpetual ownership model, when it's time to turn over for that particular clinician, that the value of the business will be greater than it would have been if they were on their own due to the nature of the association with the group and the top co and the buying power that you get and the support the organization has. So that creates a greater outcome ultimately for that particular doctor. Is the pitch?
You've nailed it. It's the same premise of a private equity roll-up. Look, I've got standardization. I've got better business procedures. I've got support staff. And all those things raise the value. When you look at a dentist who would come in and buy a solo practice, and they're paying 75% of collections to buy that practice. They have a very big fear from day one. Will this, especially if you're buying a big practice, $3 million practice, and this doctor is it. Everyone in the community knows them. They get the referrals. They have relationships, et cetera. I might be the world's best dentist, but I have no idea if that's going to transfer. So the more that you can create a certainty around that, which we do in a variety of ways. One, as part of a group, it's going to be a bigger practice. Almost all of our practices go to be multi-doc practices. So just from that, you lose a lot of that uncertainty. It's not about just one person. Two, the staff are going to be much higher trained, more best practices, more operational performance, where it's not, I have to have all the business intelligence to run this group. There are support systems in place to keep continuity there. And those things make it so that you can feel as a dentist buying in that the continuity is much more likely and probable. No different than in a private equity, roll-up model. And so that absolutely helps our doctors get premium returns when it's time for them to sell. And look, for the incoming doctors, we can tell them, we can show them all these other practices where we've sold and what it looks like and show them this isn't a one-off where you're just taking a gamble on yourself. And if it works, look at all these other practices. We have a system. We know what this looks like. We know what how to help you come in and be successful and get the value that you need. And it ends up being a great investment for them. I mean, the thing that's core to all of these models is the business of dentistry is a good one. If it's done right, there is great profit to be had. These are great cash flowing businesses. And we just help remove a lot of that uncertainty and therefore, reinforce the practice value when it's time for them to leave.
So you touched on it just a second ago, but the implications of this model for the profile of a practice that you would want to be affiliated with Accelerate has to be different. Like, you're not necessarily looking for somebody, I would assume, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, that is 6 months away from retiring or is looking to make this their exit. You're looking for somebody to provide value to the organization for quite some time before the perpetual model turns over within their practice. It sounds like you also are looking for practices of a certain size or that have kind of a certain look, feel, profile. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So you're correct on the first point. This is not a short-term model. If you are retiring in 2 years, we tell dentists, you really should go talk to my friends at Heartland, my friends at MBQ. They'll take good care of you. You're going to get a premium valuation. These are good organizations. For us, we want to know that there's probably at least 3 years, that we can help you put things into place. We're okay if you want to leave. By the way, we're very creative because of our model. We don't need you to leave at 3 years. This is a multi-doctor practice. We've actually got more creativity for a dentist around what if leaving for you actually means going from 3 days to 1 day a week? Or by the way, 1 week a month instead. And you still have some income while you travel and you can still be a part of the practice. But because these are multi-doc practices, you don't have the same pressure from a new doc who really wants to do it their own way. And we don't deal with some of that stuff. So yeah, number one is we want to have at least a little bit of longevity. On the other side of the practices we attract, then I'll get to culture and mindset. We're actually a lot more flexible. So we've partnered with practices that are doing as low as $600K of collections. We generally want them to have at least 4 ops and ideally room to expand just because we want to be able to help them. It's very important to help them grow their practice. We want to show value. And the way we set up our model is we actually get no benefit at all unless they see growth. So when we say we're going to be a 50-50 partner, we're actually 50-50 on the growth, not on what you've actually done to this point. So if you're getting a 100K, profit distribution every year, we don't get 50K of that on day one. If we grow to 200K, we'll get 50K of the 100 we added. We don't pull from the old stuff. So we want to make sure that we can actually help them. And so usually for us, so from a practice size, it's actually quite expansive. Now, that doesn't mean we won't talk to smaller doctors. We just tend to say, look, the business of dentistry is such that scale matters and you're actually better. And we've done this multiple times to blend into another practice and help become a multi-doctor practice because 2 3-op practices that are merged into a 7-op practice, it's like 20 times more profitable. If you're even profitable at all, it's infinite because most of those practices literally have 0 profit. So we're actually very flexible on the type of practice. But the most important thing to your third point is the culture and mentality of who we want. That doesn't mean that we have doctors who just don't want to run a practice and they're great partners in another bigger practice where we have someone who does want to run a practice. But as I said, we actually have a very elongated diligence process. We spend 2 months with these doctors. And you know what? I'll tell you, less than 3 days of that is the financial diligence. We can do that in 2 seconds and decide, what the fair value is of a practice. It's very much about their long-term goals, their mentality, their personality types, what they want to accomplish. And we're looking for people who want to be partners in growth. They have a growth mindset. They want to try new things. They're open to new ideas. If we find someone who says, look, I love what you're doing. It'd be great to have the accounting help and, whatever. We don't do this to get a small service fee. Those are all break-even things for us to try to bring scale to our practices. We want someone that can help us help them. Because remember, my investors are other practices. They're other dentists. The premise is almost like, hey, you're going to trade half or a third of your practice for ownership in 30 other practices. Those other practices also want to know that you want to grow too. And so I think that almost becomes the most important thing in who we pick to be partners.
So you're really, really looking to align incentives there and ensure that everybody's kind of on board with the same mission and vision mindset. So the control piece, kind of going back to the beginning where you get hung up on the 51%. Well, I think the obvious answer is, control, right? Like the ability to manage by, as you said, do this because we said you have to do this. You entered into the environment is now one of leadership by influence, really, in large part, which is a completely different kind of framework. What are some of the approaches that you have to be effective at that?
Great question. We had to give up this idea that, we can't tell someone what to do. And what's great about that is it creates enormous trust in the relationship because it means the standard of performance on us is a lot higher. If I'm going to come to you and recommend that you should deploy this software, or you should consider these collections methodologies, or here's a different procedure for how you run some operations in practice, the onus is on us to test it, to get data on it, to show a true ROI on it, and to really prove it. I can't just say, because I said so, we're all moving to X software, we're all moving to whatever. It's, hey, we've done trials on this and we think it's really beneficial. And so it raises the bar for us to show hard ROI on some of these things because we don't make any money on this. We only make money as a company and as investors if we grow these practices. And so if we're proposing something, they know we come from a place of, hey, we've seen this work in other practices. And so that's really great. And, we'll see 80+% compliance on some of those things because of that trust. That there may be certain things that a doctor just really wants to do it their way. And we support that. I mean, part of what we love is dentists that really feel strongly about their patients and their practice and they're passionate about it and they put in the work. But you're correct. It puts a high bar on us to show ROI and to focus on things like patient outcomes, to focus on things like what makes patients happy and delivers quality care, what makes your life easier and simpler, and to actually come with them armed with knowledge on those things. We also find doctors that, want to be pilot partners. And when we're testing out AI, we want to start who are excited about that, and we'll do the test first. We've put a lot of time and effort into we have councils. So we have a clinical council as an example and a culture council. And we have doctors that volunteer to be on these councils and spend a lot of their time evaluating some of these things. And so their peers trust them. We always wanted this to be don't look at Mike as a business guy saying, hey, this is just a pure ROI move. It's a dentist saying, wow, I've tried this AI solution and it's unbelievable what it's done for my free time, for my patient's ability to accept that treatment. And yeah, it costs a little bit of money, but we're seeing huge ROI. Those are the kind of levers that we push on. And not that others don't think about that as well, but we have to clear that bar. Otherwise, there's literally no way for us to force a doctor to do anything intentionally.
So I'd be interested when you were creating this model and kind of working through, your risk analysis and, your strategy guy, you got your MBA, you had experience at McKinsey. Like if you were going to say like, here's the risk profile for if somebody else was wanting to start this, what are some of the things that you particularly need to protect against? Like it could be the inmates running the asylum. I don't know what at scale at some point, too many providers come on that have different mindsets that are believing different things, or the transactions when people start to sell over time don't adhere to the same spirit as kind of the initial creation of the organization. What are some of the things that you think about that you just want to ensure that you protect against over time, potentially being detrimental to the value creation?
I think one of the things that all DSOs have learned, over the last couple of years, I think post-pandemic, there was a huge rush and tons of people that flooded the space and thought, this is easy. We're going to flip these practices in a couple of years and make a ton of money. It definitely is a long-term mindset. We are in this for the long haul. I mean, we think of ourselves as owning these practices for 50 years, and by the way, a lot of those practices, that's what they look like. We have practices that grandfather started and passed to son, who passed to his daughter, to whatever, right? They've been run for multi-generations. And so it's a long-term mindset. Number two, we have a motto internally that's be curious. We need to always be learning, always be looking at the new trends. Once you start to get stagnant and just say, well, we figured it out, we don't need to evolve anymore. That's a particular temptation in healthcare sometimes. We need to be willing to look at those things all the time. I would say we still have to focus on operational excellence, all the time. We need to bring in people that know how to run practices and can provide quality of advice. It's not just because we're nice, friendly people, somehow it's going to be great. We really need to know what good policies and practices are that help eliminate some of the challenges in a practice. But the most important thing always will be, it makes selecting your partner all the more important. And one of my partners likes to say, there's nothing better in life than a good partner. And there's nothing worse in life than a bad partner, and you can think of the marriage analogy all the time, right? You see marriages where you're committed, you're on the same goals, you're moving in the right direction together, and you provide the most sublime happiness and joy in your life. And you see the reverse. You can think of nothing worse. And interestingly, some of the, horror stories from DSOs is often because that partner switches. You may like the first partner that you're with, and then there's a recap and a new PE firm comes in. And now I have a different partner who's more than happy to, hey, remember how you signed away 65% of your practice? Well, things are going to be different now. And your life is living hell, for some of those doctors. So we focus on making sure that we have great partnerships. And it doesn't mean that we're perfect, but as we focus on those things, it ensures, long-term success. I mean, we're ultimately a fund manager. This is an investment. We are a coalition of dentists investing in other like-minded practices. And hopefully we see a 80-90% success rate where we find the right practices and we help them grow. And, because if they don't, we'll eventually dissolve that partnership. It just doesn't make sense to chase it if it doesn't make sense.
And with a model like this, initially, I was thinking, well, how do individual practices feel like part of something larger or part of this bigger organization? I love the council concept. Can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe anything else that you all do to create connection to the, Accelerate Dental brand?
So right now we're still a regional group, right? So we're in the Mountain West, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, a lot of these states right now. We're just crossing the 30 practice mark at this point. So our dentists are actually somewhat geographically concentrated, and the same would be true as we move to other, states as well. So one of the things that they love about this is we've created, we've made substantial investments in a communications platform. And so our office managers are connected. Our doctors are connected. They share advice all day long. And a lot of the value we bring is not that, hey, Mike, the super CEO is going to tell you how to run a perfect business. It's that in 2 seconds on your mobile phone, app, you can text 45 other doctors for a best practice on something, and you're going to get at least 3 responses in the next 2 hours. We brought on a new dentist 4 months ago who had never done implants, and he's always wanted to. He said, I'm thinking about implants. Do I go do one of these super expensive courses? And one of our dentists that was 2 hours away said, you need to come to my practice for a week for free. Yeah, he bought an implant kit, came up to the practice, spent a week with this doctor, ended up placing 10 implants side by side with an expert, goes back and he's ready to go. That's an enormous benefit. And not that they do it for financial reasons, but because they're co-owners in each other's practices on some level, they each own a 0.5% of everyone else's practice. They have a motivation and a desire to do that. And what's interesting about dentistry is it can be an incredibly lonely profession. If you're a solo dentist, you have a staff that just has a different background, educational level, attainment than you do. These are really smart people and they're totally alone. And so we connect them. So what is the communications platform? We do annual retreats for our doctors. We all come together. We do CE together. We do fun activities together and really build that camaraderie. We end up doing a lot of those regional training events as well. And, social activities. It's a barbecue, it's a swim party, it's a whatever to get docs together. We're about to kick off our first annual service mission trip where the docs are all participating on something like this. Again, these things bring camaraderie and they start to build connections. And what's fun about that is it tends to also create business ideas. More than once we've had docs that say, hey, we're actually only a half hour apart. And do you know this dentist down the road that has this practice? What if we went together and helped buy that? We have a concept inside that we call a mini DSO, where we actually help doctors have the engine, the scale, the playbook to have 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 practices of their own. Again, we help them manage it. And so we make some of those connections and they find a like-minded partner. And we've had many of these docs then go on to buy into multiple practices together. So that really brings people together. And so they feel like they're part of a cool club. And it's not just a study group of some sort. These are people that I really know. And when I'm having real issues in my practice, I got people I can reach out to that understand it. And for us, that extends not just to the dentist, to their office managers as well, to the hygiene team, to staff. They have other resources, and you go from being all alone on an island, and I've got to figure this all out on my own or spend tons of money to get a consultant in here or something to, wow, I've got tons of colleagues at my fingertips. And it's a very supportive environment for those doctors.
Say a little bit more about what you all are doing for the service project.
We haven't announced, we're announcing it in about 3 weeks to our doctors, but the plan is to go to Peru. We've found an organization that helps host larger groups because we'll probably bring 20 or so folks on this one. And we're going to Peru to do some dental care and spend 3/4 of the week doing some dental care. And then we'll add on a day or two of fun at the end. So yeah, super excited about that.
Love that. I'd be remiss not to talk to you a bit about technology, given your background and your knowledge about the landscape in general. I remember watching you on a podcast, maybe it was Bill Newman, or maybe it was just on stage somewhere when you were at HS1. And I was listening to you talk and I was like getting a little nervous because I'm like, man, this guy gets it. Like he's definitely like he thinks like we think. He's saying all the things that we talk about in our meetings. Like this is a really great approach. When you look at the landscape out there today, you mentioned AI. Obviously, AI is kind of hot button topic right now. Everybody's looking at imaging AI, but there's a whole plethora of other platforms or products or features out there at this point. Everything from answering phone calls to chat bots to auto charting to voice perio to whatever the case may be. What are some of the things that you're excited about or that you think have promise that are different than what people are doing today?
Definitely an area of passion for me. I'm actually a SaaS software guy at heart, love technology. And it's been interesting. I thought, that was thesis number one is we're going to come in and we're going to have the best tech stack ever and build an amazing tech-enabled BSO. And ironically, you realize really quick that that's actually not where some of the profit pools and issues are. Software is incredible at supporting things over time. It can help reduce labor costs and all those things. So I'm still a believer, but ironically, the levers are much more around collections and adding associates and, figuring out ways to optimize procedures. That said, I do think we have a lot of transformative things that are helping. The last year has been unbelievable for artificial intelligence. I remember, again, I ran a telehealth startup all the way to an IPO. I remember when Watson came out, and every single healthcare show I'd go to, we'd do the Watson demo. And then every year I'd have Watson salespeople apply to come work at my company because nobody was buying it because there wasn't an ROI and it just didn't work. When I contrast that to some of the phone answering apps that I started to see and hear and how realistic and how great they are. I was listening to a podcast yesterday that talked about how they've now trained AI to do a better job in like suicide crisis centers, being more empathetic and having great outcomes. It's unbelievable what some of that tech can do. And obviously we still believe in the power of relationships, especially in a community dental practice. You love that front office manager. They know your kids. There's great things that happen. So I don't think that replaces everything. I've worked with a number of technologies around AI and radiology over my career, but especially in dentistry when I was at HS1 and now. That's an area where we see incredible promise. Again, as a dentist, you're kind of lonely. And if there's an area that many dentists struggle with because they tend to have more introverted personalities, they really struggle with case presentation. And they want to be empathetic. They know people are tight on money and it's like, well, you could do this, but you could wait a little longer. It's helped them have so much confidence to use an AI imaging platform and say, look, the data is here. And look, we can progress this by 6 months and see where it's at. Look, these are the ones to watch. And it makes them feel like they're not alone. And the trials I've seen, not only at our DSO, but other DSOs, that it's actually helped doctors identify things. That's better care. And that's where we get real excited about technology is better care. Obviously, patient reminders and communications platforms are great. We all lead hectic lines and having those in place are wonderful. And they're actually great for patients. I'm a big believer in things like online booking. When you move to the consumerization of every industry, you need to meet your patients where they are and the chaos of their lives. So those are all great. But another one that I think has lacked in tools that I think we're having a little bit of a renaissance right now is in revenue cycle management. We're starting to see some really neat technologies. I'll try not to name check anyone, but there are neat tools out there that are helping just get rid of a lot of the heartache and challenge and mental strain in a dental practice. When you're trying to tick and tie every single thing and get it done right and chase the insurance company, 30 times. I actually worked with an incubator at a local university that kicked out this amazing AI-based product to help, be on the phone with the insurance companies. And, someday we're just going to have AIs talking to AI.
Robots talking to robots. Yeah.
I mean, AI can sit on the phone for an hour with the insurance AI, but those things are great for a practice. They lower the cost, they make lives better. And, it's interesting in healthcare, we talked about the quadruple aim. It used to be the triple aim, and it was all about reducing costs and high quality care, et cetera, et cetera. But they added a fourth one, which was how do you improve the lives of physicians and clinicians? And I think dentists feel that same thing in dentistry as doctors felt in the general healthcare industry is there's so much stress and pressure on some of these things. And some of these software tools are really helping ease it. So those are a couple areas I'm super excited about.
You're welcome to name drop as much as you would like as well. People love to hear like what's out there that's exciting that can make a difference for their business. So you don't need to be shy with that. I love what you said about the radiographic AI piece. I think when all these companies first launched, the prevailing approach or pitch was like, you're going to make more money in your practice. It was like, you're going to be doing more crowns. You're going to do this. You're going to and it was very kind of driven by this thought of profit versus the actual building of credibility and increased trust between a patient and the provider, which is where the true value comes in. And then the result by default of that is, yes, increased production. But there's the reason for it is what you're building there in the chair during the case presentation, as you say. So I think that also has helped people view it as non-threatening because a lot of dentists are like, wait, I don't need this. I see all this already. But they forget the point that like me, who doesn't, I would love to see that in my dental practice and be able to more clearly understand what the heck is going on instead of this like weird shaded x-ray that's really like nondescript.
It's like a Rorschach test. We are so fortunate in the United States, the amount of medical technology we have. And so when you think that this is an FDA approved software platform, right, and literally go in and by the way, that increases trust, like you said. I know my doctor's not that many, the vast majority of doctors would never do this to try to treat things. But the doctors say, look, we're using good technology here to help you find the things that can improve your well-being. And we all know the linkage between oral health and the rest of your health picture. And so I think these are transformative things that take an enormous burden off the doctors and bring trust and security to patients. And frankly, I think in time, that standard of care raises, just like it has in other aspects of our healthcare, where you judge your doctor based on the technology they have in the office, because it brings trust and security. And I want to go to the doctor who's got good equipment that I know is the latest and greatest, and that helps us advance. It's not about a leather strap and a really good pair of pliers, right? We've evolved in dentistry. I see in the 3D, imaging system, and I like seeing that they can print my crowns instantly in the office and don't have to wait for that. I love this stuff.
Yeah. No, it really is. The new technology is pretty fantastic. And I did have a crown recently, and they made it right there, the CEREC machine. And I was like, how awesome is this? That's incredible. So they take the picture of your mouth and all of a sudden it's rendered in like 3D and they know exactly where it goes. I was like, this is really neat stuff. Like it really does lend to a higher degree of comfort as a patient too, knowing that you're being taken care of with kind of state-of-the-art things. Going back to the RCM piece real quick, with the model with Accelerate, would you ever see the ability or opportunity, or even have the desire to centralize any like billing services or RCM services, or try to take that off the plate of those practices? Or given the model, does it lend itself more to ensuring that the individual practices themselves are just going to be equipped as best as possible to do that?
So like all things, I think the value of a group is scale, and you can invest in more tech and more resources and more training and more talent as a group, because a practice can only afford a half a person, but we can afford 10 people. So we actually have invested significantly in a revenue cycle management team and billings and collections expertise. We tend to, that started for us as a way to help the lower quartile practices. Look, if you've got an office manager that gets it, and everyone knows when you've met that person who's incredibly good at this and knows all the codes, don't mess it up. They're doing a great job. But we had a lot of offices that's not where their expertise was. And we said, great, you struggle to go hire the caliber of person who could turn your office around. But because I have scale, I can go hire a team of 10 and they can serve 15 offices. That's not a problem. And they all have an immense amount of expertise and can process 900 claims a month, where, that front desk lady who's trying to figure out your manual and how you do this might do 200. And, our commitment to our doctors is always that anytime we build a service out, this is not a profit center for us. We do this as a service to the group because, again, we're the DSO. You guys own it. This is what you want. And so if we as a dental group, as dentists, think that this is a worthwhile investment to help our practices, and they know that they're getting the best price they possibly could on something like this because it's at scale, then they're not scared of it. And what we find is the ones that are really good at it don't feel a need and don't have to adopt it. And those that need help are thrilled to know they're getting a cost-effective service that will help improve things. And so our RCM is a great example of that, but the same logic applies to things like recruiting. It applies to procurement. It applies to many other topics. And that's where I think it's not that dentists can still benefit from scale, right? Scale is always helpful. So I believe in those trends. I just believe that dentists need to own a bigger chunk of where it goes.
So last question, I've been reading some of the books on the shelf behind you, but where do you go to learn? What's your approach? You were just mentioning you were listening to a podcast yesterday, but share a little bit about, how you approach that.
Oh, I love that. One of my mantras that we talk about with our dentists is that leaders are readers. So I'm a big fan of reading. I read 50 books last year.
All paper, Kindle, or Audible?
I'm probably 15% paper, probably 15% Kindle, and I'm probably 70% audiobook. I do the beneficial reward system where my workout time is my reading time. And so I get something out of it.
What's your speed that you listen at?
Okay, I am a 1.75 It's just the nature of my personality. And again, I live in the Utah mountains, so I do a lot of mountain biking. It's also a great time to listen to books. But one of the things we've done for our doctors, we have a leadership training curriculum. So every other month we have a topic. It's building culture in your practice, how to give feedback, how to read financial statements, whatever it is that we've developed. It's kind of like a mini MBA, and our doctors embrace this. If you don't have a growth mindset, you're going to stay exactly where you are. And that's one of the things we screen for and look for in folks that are going to lead our practices. It doesn't mean that every dentist has to be that way. There's always a need for good dentists that are just really good at patient care and they're not as interested in the leadership side. But it is what distinguishes leaders. And so I definitely do a lot of books. I do a lot of podcasts. There are so many great podcasts like this one in the dental industry. And it's just great. It's fun that we're in an industry where, and I think because you're in healthcare, people do want to share. I've loved being a part of the ADSO as an example. And, you've got some of the leaders like Steve Built and folks that you've brought up, or Pat over at Harlan. These folks are very happy to share their insights and expertise. And so I found a number of amazing podcasts in the dental field as well that have been incredibly helpful to me.
That's great. Mike, I appreciate you coming on. If people want to learn more about Accelerate Dental, where can they go?
So you can always go to acceleratedental.com. Anyone's welcome to email me directly. I'm just Mike at acceleratedental.com. We love talking to dentists, and generally we're pretty transparent. I've talked to many dentists and said, the right answer for you is not to go with us, go somewhere else. We really have a goal to make sure that we put dentists first. It's one of our cultural values. And so, but anyone's welcome to email me anytime. We're here to help.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS, home of Dental OS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening.